Hey, David.
Hey Scott, how's it going?
It's going well. Thanks a lot for taking a little time to explore with us your journey with mindfulness and meditation more broadly, perhaps, as it relates to life and the study and practice of law. In a moment, I'm interested in you sharing a little bit about where you are now since you've graduated law school, just so people can have a sense of what you're doing with your life professionally. Before we get there, though, you shared with me before how you first became interested, or one of the early exposures you had to mindfulness and meditation. And perhaps you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, of course. So I've been, doing some kind of meditation practice since 2012, which is when I sort of stumbled into meditation. I had had a roommate who was in a comparative religion class in college, and I was at a really bad point in my life. There was just a lot of things going on. Among them was I had a really bad breakup and just a lot of things that were going wrong in my life. It was my senior year of college, and trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I was having a hard time, and my roommate, I think you know in a kind effort to sort of, get me out of the house more than anything, suggested I come with him on his project to, go and visit a bunch of different religious sites. So one week we went to a church together, we went to a mosque, and then one week we went to a Zen meditation center called the Gateless Gate Zen Meditation Center. And so in that class, we did in that center, we did a very, it was a kind of a Korean Zen class, and it was very focused in that tradition. But I remember walking out of the class feeling just very light in a way I hadn't felt in months, maybe even years. And, I really latched on to that, and I kept kind of going back to the center. I never really connected with the religious pieces of it. I find Buddhism really interesting, but like a lot of religion, it just doesn't fully resonate with me. But I really loved the meditation practice, and I had done it. I started doing it every day because it just made a huge difference in my life in a way that other interventions hadn't. Um, and it's interesting because it was both an immediate kind of result. Like I noticed feeling calm immediately. And then, as I sort of did it regularly, it's kind of like if you've ever, done any kind of working out in a sense, like if you ever run or you lift weights or anything like that. Um, you know, you go through a period where it's kind of just it plateaus out, and you're like, oh, maybe this isn't doing anything, maybe it isn't changing, and then 3 months later you sort of you look at yourself in the mirror, or you run a longer distance than you've ever run before, or you lift more weight than you've ever lifted, and you're kind of like, oh wow, actually doing it every day has made a really big difference. And I just I've gotten so caught up in the incremental changes, and honestly that feeling has kept coming back to me more and more with meditation over the past, I don't know, decade and change now. It's crazy. But you really start to look back at the way that you used to think about things, and the way you used to react to things, and you just sort of realize the way that the practice has changed you as a person. And so that's sort of how I got to the time before your class, which was I just had a regular practice going, 20 minutes of sort of silent meditation every morning. Uh, and, it had made big differences in my life and had been really helpful in every part of my life, and including law school. Yeah.
All right. Could you speak a little bit to, there probably were a variety of things that you were doing or friends were sort of inclining you to do to sort of get out of your funk, or, to lift your mood, or to sort of, get you back in a more, excited, energized state, however you might frame that. And you spoke a little bit toward the end of what you said to the ways in which it might shape the way you relate to your experiences and things like that. Could you, not that something is better than something else, but in what ways was the practice that you were doing and the changes you were seeing specifically as it relates to changes that have maybe an enduring effect, where some things might be short-lived? The practice,
Right.
could you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah. Well, in college, I was going through the entire band of solutions, from the ultra healthy of just, trying to work out every day, doing all the sort of scientifically recommended things, drinking a lot of water, being around friends, all that kind of stuff, to the complete opposite unhealthy side of the spectrum of just like, eating junk food and, drinking and, things like that. I tried a whole bunch of stuff, very candidly, and it all works, right? Like, I mean, everything works in a certain way, to make you feel better. And some are more positive and more, long-term beneficial, and some are more short-term beneficial, but it all sort of works in some sense or another. But I think that the difference between those sorts of things and, mindfulness practice is that a mindfulness practice really, um, provides you with an in-depth awareness of how you're experiencing something in a particular moment, right? And I think that awareness is just so helpful, in my life. Like, I remember I had my first meditation teacher at the Zen Center, always described meditation as something very subtle. He said it's when you're at a bar and you are pissed off at someone and you want to punch them. Meditation gives you the space between when you actually punch them and, when if you decide to walk away, right? It just gives you this little tiny window of space, which, it seems so small, but you actually have a choice when you have that space, whereas without that, you don't. And I guess sort of the larger point I'm trying to make here is just, you have all these different options for how to feel better or how to, improve your mood in any particular moment, or, do something. And meditation and mindfulness practices really help you, become attuned to what you're doing, why you're doing it, how your body is processing what you're doing, what the full spectrum of risks and rewards are.
And what I'm hearing is that it's not that when one goes to the bar to sit down, that one is intentionally saying, oh, now I'm going to practice mindfulness, or, oh, now I'm going to be mindful. It's that something has been cultivated and developed through practice, so that in those moments, there's this larger sense of self-awareness. And as you say, more space to be more deliberate and intentional in terms of what one does next.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. You have, just from a physiological point of view, you have all these emotions and chemicals that are rushing through you all the time, and thoughts too. And sometimes you can just get so caught up in those that decisions get made for you. And I think one of the things that's really profound about a meditative practice, and that you sort of have to do it every day, because it's just it's kind of like anything. You have to get used before you can do it sort of in a natural way. You have to do it sort of in an unnatural way.
And so, a handful of years after that, in your undergraduate career, you found your way to law school and eventually to the mindfulness in law class. And then you graduated. Could you say a little bit about your professional journey since you graduated, and maybe give us a sense of time?
Yeah, so I've been out of law school now for 3 years. Um, like everyone, after law school, I took the bar. And then I started working at a big law firm, Greenberg Traurig, as an associate attorney, and I did that for 2 years. And then, sort of for personal and professional reasons, I knew I didn't really want to be in big law forever. And I had actually planned to stay for longer, but I got this opportunity to go in-house at a private equity fund. So that was a really great opportunity for me. And I just decided to take it. And I've been there for 8 months now, HIG Capital, and I'm enjoying it a lot.
Yeah. Could you say a little bit about, and congratulations on embarking on your professional career in a way that also has you keeping your eyes open to what's most important to you and where you'll find the greatest satisfaction and reward for a career, a life in the law, as it often plays out. Um, Say a little bit about where the practice plays into your day-to-day life at work and or outside of work.
Yeah, I mean, if it's okay with you, I'll start even with just law school. Because I think it's important to even understand how important it was for me there, and how it really set the stage for success in my career in general. Basically, I really think a lot of a lot of law school is unfortunately just a lot of pressure tactics. And I think particularly in that first semester, it's just, I always describe it to people like you're walking, every year of law school is like walking through a series of dark rooms where the light switches on the other side. So you don't really know what you just came through until you finish it. And I actually think practicing the law is very similar to that, where it's, sort of like you start practice and you're constantly in the dark and you don't know anything, and you're expected to know everything because you have clients who are, who don't really understand that lawyers only know one very particular area of the law and not, everything. And you just kind of feel like you're fumbling around a lot. And I think, mindfulness really helps bring you back to a sort of calm, so that you're not flailing and you're not panicking. And mindfulness can really help you let go of that sense of panic and that sense of anxiety, which aren't really serving you, and sort of help you, come into a state of attentiveness and focus, which I found really helpful to me. And I think that part of the reason I didn't fall into some of the same pitfalls some of my colleagues did, what was for that reason, just, not allowing my emotions to sort of get the better of me. And I credit that entirely to my mindfulness practice, and just having that sort of ability to, come back to a sort of center. And, it's very similar in my actual practice as a lawyer. As your students will learn quite soon, the beginning of the practice of law is very much you hit the ground running. The bar exam is very much that. And there's just so much, anxiety around all those things. But like the bar exam is the first example of that, because it's very, it feels very all or nothing. There's such a huge amount of topics. You kind of feel like when you're doing it, how could anybody be expected to know all of this material? And also they're trying to trick you. And I panicked during the bar too. Like, it's mindfulness, as frustrating as it was for me, even at that time, where it was like, I've been meditating for 10 years and I'm still having panic attacks during the bar. And, it's just, I think that even though I had those kind of anxiety spirals, and I've had them at points in my career as well, my mindfulness practice has helped me kind of come out of them. It's like you get into a storm of feelings and they're awful and you're kind of stuck in it and you don't know how to get out. But you sort of look for the space, right? You look for the space in the storm to find, calmer seas, to torture this metaphor a little further. And you really do, it really does help you find a way out. And that finding a way out is just really important in the practice of law. I mean, for one, no matter what practice of law you go into, there's always high emotions. But even in transactional law, at the negotiation table, there can be a lot of fist pounding. And I have found, mindfulness has been really helpful to me in, not getting caught up in someone else's emotions. Because when people are angry, when they're pounding their fists, it really helps me to not hear it, get defensive, get angry, react. It allows me to sort of just allow them to be angry, say everything they have to say, and then reiterate my point calmly, and just sort of make the argument that I have to make, which is ultimately the best thing that you can do as a lawyer, which is make the argument that you have to make. And try to do it in a calm, professional way. And honestly, when you sort of diffuse emotion from the situation and you take emotion out of it to the best that you can, usually you don't leave people feeling unhappy with you. I mean, they're going to be unhappy because if you have bad news, they're going to be unhappy with it, but it feels less personal and it feels less like it's like losing an argument more than it is like, being called a terrible person who, and I found that to be really helpful in disarming people and in just, allowing a conversation to sort of come back to a place where we can actually find a way forward. I think that's been a really critical skill, and it's been critical not just dealing with clients. It's critical dealing with other lawyers, even ones on your side, and it really helps with that. I find that a lot of what's difficult about your first years of practice is you get caught up in these emotions, whether they're anger at clients or partners or other associates, whether it's sadness because you feel completely like an imposter and you don't know how you're gonna do this project that was assigned to you that's way outside of your range of skills, or just generalized anxiety where it's just every day you feel like you don't really know what you're doing and you don't really belong there. And I think that mindfulness can just really help you understand why you're feeling those things, and maybe not in like specific logical words why you're feeling those things, but it can just help you understand that you are feeling those things. That's the distinction I actually should say. It helps you understand that you are feeling something and that that's not the world necessarily, and that you can feel those things and pull back and find another way to deal with things, and that you don't have to be stuck in that one way of being. And I found that just very helpful in practice.
What does your current practice look like on a weekly basis in terms of what you might do or when you might do it, and for how long perhaps? And is it always the same or does it vary? In fact, we could say, if we just to break that down to time, place, and manner, what time of day do you tend to practice if it's regular? Place, where do you tend to practice? And manner, sort of a little bit about the nature of the practice that you do.
Sure. So aspirationally, I would love, and I very strongly underline aspirationally, I would love to meditate or practice mindfulness. Very fine-grained distinction in the community on that. I would love to do it like 3 times a day. I think, morning, midday, and night, just because doing even a small practice like 10, 12 minutes or something like that can really help reset in the afternoon. It's sort of almost like a cup of coffee in the afternoon, where it just can really, the days that I've done it, which are few and far between, since most of my work days I'm just kind of, at the computer at 10 and there until, 6, 7, whenever, just kind of lost in the spiral, in the stream of work that comes through. But when I do it, when I do take those 10 minutes, I actually find every single time I'm much more productive and usually able to get out a little earlier. So I'd love to do that. And then one at night, just after the end of the workday, because it's very helpful at night, just in terms of letting go of work. What you'll find, what your students will find as they practice is that matters don't ever resolve in a day. And a lot of times you just have people who are just very difficult to deal with, and matters that are very tricky, and people's emotions are running high because there's a lot of money on the table, or whatever it is that's important to them. And you just want the thing to end. Like, oh, you just keep thinking about how it can end, and your brain just keeps cycling on, oh, what can I do to sort of get this done? Or how do I get out of this? How do I get out of this miserable matter? And so at night, it can be very helpful in just, allowing yourself to be at home a little bit and enjoy that your life is not entirely your work and that you have, other things, whatever they are, whether it's family or pets or TV or exercise, I don't know, whatever it is, like there's just other things outside of the law, and it can sometimes be hard to let go of that. But I actually find the most important and non-negotiable practice for me is first thing in the morning. I've been doing a meditation practice with a couple slip ups very consistently since 2012, at first thing in the morning. I do it first thing in the morning because I can always control the time I wake up. I can't always control the time I go to bed. And I find that 20 minutes of less, hopefully it's never it's not a choice you have to make, but I always think that the 20 minutes of less sleep is a better trade-off than is better to trade off than not having the meditation practice. And I found that to be true in a number of occasions, the few times I alluded to where I skipped it. Just having that way of focusing and starting the day and sort of setting a, I don't even want to call it necessarily an intention, because it's not like I'm not consciously saying, oh, today's going to be a great day, but it's just sort of setting the intention, I guess, of being calm through the day and being able to sort of deal with whatever the day has to come to you. So that's more or less the timing. As far as the actual practice goes, I will do a silent meditation a couple times a week. I enjoy it. I mean, that's how I sort of started meditating, and I enjoy it. Since the mindfulness and law class, I've really done. Your class really exposed me to a lot of different forms of mindfulness that are actually very helpful, and they're very different from a silent practice. So, but you can just get so much from these different forms of mindfulness practices. And so I really tried to incorporate, different ones throughout the week. The ones that we're familiar with in the class, particularly the body scan, is a really great one. I actually will sometimes push my morning I usually work out in the morning as I get up very early. So I usually work out in the morning as well. And I will sometimes do the body scan after I work out, because I find it really helpful when you have a lot of physical data coming at you. So that's a great practice. I like the focused awareness practice, just being able to sort of tune into to different sounds, the different sounds, different smells, different feelings, and then just obviously the focused attention, which I think is actually a little different than the silent meditation, because with focused attention you can sort of focus on anything rather than just sort of the breath, which is what the prototypical silent meditation is. And then, as we've talked about a lot, I really like the loving kindness practice. I think that practice is really beneficial, especially when you're working through something difficult with someone who is also being kind of difficult. I find that practice to be really helpful. And then just otherwise trying to just remember mindfulness through the day. I think not just in these kind of practices where you sit and you say, oh, I'm going to do mindfulness now, but like just trying to sort of attend to different moments. And I try, all the time to catch myself, which is a lot of what the actual sitting practice is, where you sit and I like the silent meditation practice because often that is very much the practice that most generates just like resistance from your body, where it's like your body will just bring up a ton of thoughts and feelings and reactions to just distract you from the practice. And you just have to bring yourself back to the breath, bring yourself back to the breath, bring yourself back to the breath. And, in life, it's very much like that. When you're driving, you're very focused on driving and you're really angry about, some guy who cut you off, which happens to me almost every day in Miami. And in those moments, like I'll get really angry. Like I'm not trying to pretend that I'm Buddha on a hill. I get angry all the time in those situations. And when I can sort of catch myself before I just scream out at nothingness in my car, and I can sort of just say, like, my screaming isn't going to make this, he's not going to learn a lesson or decide that he's not going to cut people off in the future. My screaming isn't going to, like, do anything but, be kind of upsetting to me in the car. And when I can sort of catch myself before I do that, it always just sort of feels almost like a superpower, uh, and that's, I actually think those are the most beneficial practices, because they're so unintentional, they're just in the day as you're living, as you're experiencing, so much life going on.
Let me, if I may just ask a question on what I'm hearing you speak to in some ways is having a regular practice in the morning for about 20 minutes. And that serves you well in a variety of ways. And that, for example, when in traffic and anger arises, that when you say you catch it, it sounds like it's caught, like it just happens that you have this awareness arises. You're not like, you don't have a reminder in front of you. If somebody cut you off, remember you have a choice, or remember there's space. That the practicing, among other things, perhaps facilitates this waking up out of that reactive spiral. So you catch it, like you say, you can let it go. And that sort of happens as I'm hearing it, and just want to sort of confirm that is happening almost automatically as a downstream product of being aware in those moments. And that the practicing on a regular basis facilitates that sort of that larger aspect of being mindful throughout the day, just as a matter of course, without trying to be, because you've been cultivating it through practice. And then these are moments that you're speaking to where the benefits, the fruits of it, arise almost spontaneously.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that if it doesn't happen sort of automatically, it doesn't happen, right? Because if, the minute that you get caught up in the feeling, you're already, it's like the riptide, you have to sort of let it pull you out before you can swim back. And I think that you're right. It's very much the focused everyday practice is what builds that, for lack of a better word, what builds that muscle, right? Is when you do an everyday practice, what happens inevitably, no matter what practice you choose to do, thoughts are going to call to you, feelings are going to call to you, all these things are gonna just call to you, and the practice is very much just coming back to what you're trying to do.
That's very helpful. In a moment, as we close, perhaps I request that you maybe guide us through a practice that resonates with you, that you think would be helpful for
Yeah.
us to experience. And before we do, just any resources that you have found helpful that you'd like to share.
So yeah. I really love Mind Beginner's Mind. That's an amazing resource. I really it's very Buddhist in focus, but I just really like it. I think it has some great ideas in it. I also love, in terms of books, looking at mindfulness. I think you recommended that book to me, and I think that's just a really lovely book, both from like it looks really pretty because it's just got a bunch of images of kind of art, but I just love the sort of angle of it, the way that it discusses, sort of mindfulness and looking at these different paintings, and it's a nice way of thinking through it, and a nice resource. And all the chapters are fairly short, so you can sort of just pop into one and about. As far as resources go, I think that I've worked with from time to time, apps like Calm and Headspace. I think they're very helpful in sort of starting a practice. I think at a certain point, I think it's really helpful to sort of at least do some practices that aren't guided. I think having some self-guided practices are really important. I do mostly self-guided, and I find I get a lot more out of that. But I think whatever works for anyone else whatever works better for you is what's important. Whatever helps you experience mindfulness is what's important, and I'm not going to be prescriptive about it. I have just personally found that for me, I get more out of it when I do a self-guided meditation, but apps like Headspace and Calm are really helpful for when you're sort of very much in your own head or in your feelings, and sort of listening to someone outside of you can really help you get out of that. It's also, I found a lot of people I've been friends with have found that a very nice way into a meditative practice, because it's a little less just you and yourself.
All right. So with that, would you guide us through a practice and maybe briefly just tell us what you'll be sort of offering us, although you can leave a lot of it to our direct experience, but maybe just to help inform an understanding of the pieces of what you'll be sharing with us in this practice.
Yeah. So I'm going to do a kind of modified focused attention practice. So you're, I think, currently going through a focused attention practice, or you sort of know the basics of a focused attention practice, which is just you pick an object to focus on. Typically, it's the breath. Doesn't have to be, and you just attend to that. I have found that actually a very helpful sort of slight variation on that is to do a counting your breath practice. I find that this is really helpful both in terms of maybe helping to quiet down your mind because you focus on the numbers, and I think that the sort of movement of the numbers up and down can be really helpful in terms of just taking your mind off of your thoughts, rather than your breath, which is a little bit more amorphous of a thing to focus on. I also think it can really help with the pacing from a relaxation standpoint. What you'll find in doing a mindfulness practice is often if you slow down your breath, you will slow down your mind and slow down your emotions. That the breath really does guide those things. So if you consciously attend to focus to slowing down your breath, you will often find that you will feel relaxed. It's why people often say, take 10 deep breaths when you're feeling anxious. And I think the same sort of principle applies here. And so it can be really helpful with pacing it out. So the practice I like to do, which I think is just, there's a million different types of numbered breathing techniques out there. And they all purport to do different things. I like a very simple one, which is just you count 4 breaths in, you pause, and then you count 8 breaths out, and you pause. 2 caveats there. One is just you can count to 4 very quickly or very slowly. And so part of the practice is sort of attending to how quickly or how slowly that you're counting, and just being mindful of that. And I think the other point I wanted to raise is it's very important to be mindful of the pauses at the top of the inhalation and the pause at the bottom of the exhalation. It sounds very simple, but actually that's the point in which you can very much lose your pacing. And it breaks up the counting and it makes it less mechanical. So it kind of brings more attention to the practice. I think that those pauses are actually very important. So I encourage you to be mindful of the fact that you're taking the pause as you do the practice.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So begin this practice in a seated position, upright, with your feet on the ground. And just softly close your eyes. And we're going to take a deep breath in to the count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause. Now we're going to take a deep breath out to the count of 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and pause. Now we're going to do another deep breath in to the count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause. I'm going to do a deep breath out to the count of 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and pause. And now I'm going to invite you to keep your own count and track your breathing for the next few minutes. And now, very gently bringing awareness back to the body. Maybe wiggle the hand, fingers, wiggle the toes. Bring sensation back into your body. Lift the gaze, open the eyes.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you, David. Thank you for everything you're doing in our profession now that you're actively engaged in the practice of law, and all that you did as a law student and as a part of the mindfulness and law class. I'm very grateful to you.